Are you ready?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast that acts as an arm of the newsletter for St. John Sam Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Ansom.
And I'm Casey Jeremus. I'm the creative worship director at Our Savior Lutheran.
You know, Casey, as I look at the screen here, it's just dawned on me, like the whole time I'm over here getting ready for the show kind of thing and getting ready for the recording. And I haven't really been looking at the screen for us, like with our stuff on it. And I just looked down and realized that your thing now says creative worship director.
Yeah, I usually don't put it. I usually don't put anything, but I don't know. It does have a little like, what's your role or what's your?
Oh, now I know what it is now.
Yeah, I felt like being fancy today. I don't know.
I was all confused, but now I know.
Yeah.
Oh man. There's been a lot going on.
Yeah, there has.
I mean, you know, from the political standpoint, like, you know, we got all this craziness going on. Trump almost got shot again.
Crazy.
Yeah, he was at that press conference or whatever.
Yeah, the
correspondence dinner.
Yeah, correspondence.
Yeah, that was last week. Crazy gunman.
Yeah, and now there's all, you know, there's 100 theories about what happened and what was. You know,
oh yeah.
So it goes into all that. Yeah.
And again, this is one of those things, like, I feel like we've covered it to death, right? Like, you know, disagree with your politician, don't like your politician, but don't try to assassinate your politician, you know, unless they are quite literally like Hitler. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing is I think there needs to be a history lesson at some point within our country of like who Hitler actually was and what he actually did.
Yes.
Because, you know, equating Donald Trump to Hitler is absolutely ridiculous. For that matter, equating Joe Biden to Adolf Hitler is absolutely ridiculous. Or equating Barack Obama to Adolf Hitler is absolutely ridiculous. Like, no. You know, maybe that guy, whatever his name was in Iran before he got blown up, he murdered all kinds of people.
Yes. Well, and it's, I think there's definitely, Hitler becomes more of an idea than people actually think of. Like they don't think about Hitler specifically and what he did. It's just kind of something. It's like the word fascist now.
Oh yeah,
it's just a word people throw out. And I've seen 100 videos online of people protesting, saying like, fascist. And then someone comes up to them with a camera and says, what does fascist mean? And they cannot tell you what it means.
Yeah.
And because they're just shouting it because everybody's shouting it and they don't actually know what it is. Or they try to give an explanation and it's really like, it's just talking in circles and there's no real like definition.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of things, people have to be careful. I'm very much of the like, I don't call anybody Hitler because I guess
better that way.
I've also had, I guess, not the benefit, I would say, but I have just kind of the perspective of like, I have family who came over from Austria after World War II. So I just kind of have this opinion of no, they're not, you know, like you gotta,
they might be bad. You might not like them, but
but you need to know your history and understand what you're saying, because that's a pretty big, it's a pretty big accusation that people don't quite understand what they're saying. They just, So
I obviously there's a lot of that news going on. But I'll be honest with you, I don't want to, you know, and again, it's just one of those things. Like, I feel like some of this has become so redundant. You know, we've covered a lot of this stuff before, and I just feel like we're going to be talking in circles. However, there is some synodical stuff going on.
Oh, right.
So yes. So last week, you know, in fact, this is part of the reason we didn't have it last week was because I had just pretty much gotten back from the pastors conference, and I tell you what, it shouldn't have, you know, I slept well, everything else, but I was just exhausted. You know, I even got back at like noon or something, led service that evening, but man, it hit like 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I was just like, I am done. I am just done. I couldn't stay up. I went to bed early that night.
Yeah.
but we went to so we had the pastors conference, and so I do want to talk a little bit about that. And then I also, to be honest with you, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming down the pike in terms of our convention and presidential elections.
Oh yeah.
So we can talk about that. But first, let's get to the pastors conference. We had two interesting presenters, and so just for anybody that is curious, 9 times out of 10 in our pastors conferences, the speakers that we get oftentimes are not very interesting for most people. And what I mean by that is, like, it's very much dedicated to the pastors. And so sometimes it gets into the minutia, and it's good stuff. Like we the pastors will just love it. We just, it's the minor stuff. Sometimes it gives us more perspective, and it helps us to read text maybe in a different light, understand it a little bit more deeply and better. But every now and again we have a conference, and quite frankly, I feel like if I would have told you what the conference was, most people would have said, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall in that one.
Yeah.
So the pastors conference was on demonology and spiritual warfare. So that was our topic. So really
say that one more time. Sorry.
Demonology
Okay.
and spiritual warfare.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first presenter was a guy, he's from the seminary, a professor down at the seminary, and he presented mainly on how the early church looked at things like demonology. And for what it was worth, it was kind of fascinating, but a lot of it just came down to, demons will tempt you, and they'll push you, and they try to push you in certain directions. And this was kind of the way the early church, viewed demons. Not necessarily how they viewed exorcism. That's a whole different story. That was kind of be on task with our second presenter, but anyway, but they viewed it like, kind of like demons like took up a space that was almost in a void, in a sense. And then they would just try to push you. They couldn't like take control of you per se, especially not a Christian that was baptized, but they could kind of push you in certain directions. And so they would typically push you towards what would be known as dare I say, the passions of the flesh. Now, what this really boils down to is, think of like things like the 7 deadly sins. Those would be kind of close and in par to the passions of the flesh. Obviously, like things like lust is there, but then there's also greed, and there's also gluttony,
right,
envy of another person, rage. So, kind of think of the passions of the flesh in that regard. And so this guy basically presented like, okay, like, here's the way they thought of demons. Here's the way they kind of combat them. Yes, obviously exorcism, but also trying to keep yourself in check. And again, this is one of those things, like, been, an interesting topic for me for the last several months. For those that like listen to our podcast on a regular, they'll recognize that, I've been kind of dabbling into the idea of like spiritual disciplines and stuff like that. And honestly, a lot of this would come alongside that. Basically have yourself disciplined so that when a demon kind of tries to push you in a certain direction, you can kind of combat it a little bit. So that was the first presenter. He was interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
The second presenter got us more into the realm of spiritual warfare. And he was absolutely fascinating. He just recently, I say recently, like within the last 10 years, published his PhD. His PhD from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis was actually dealing with demonology and spiritual warfare in the modern world. And so it's fascinating. I downloaded it. I plan to read it,
Yeah.
Good stuff. And so he was really, really fascinating. He's like, he talked, one of the things that he talked about that I really appreciated this, is that, like, he said, basically there's like 4 views in terms of, dare I say, demonology, so to speak. One is like the atheist, right? Like, it doesn't exist. Like, there's just no such thing. It's just not out there. It's kind of a lie. one of the other ones that I found fascinating, like, and again, I'm going to give you the big three because that's what I kind of remember, and I
Yeah.
didn't write it down for tonight. I should have. Maybe I'll find my notes later. But anyway, the other one was kind of like, well, I guess we would call them the Schwarma, and that's an old German term, but basically the charismatics. Um, and they're like, they kind of believe like demons are in everything. And I feel like I know I've talked to people about this. I don't know if I've ever talked about this in the podcast, but like when I was in Wausau, Wisconsin, I ran into a case where a man, basically thought that maybe, demonic possession was happening, or,
Oh
or at
wow.
the very least, some aspect of it was happening. He was actually sent
Right.
there by a known psychologist or a therapist or something like that. So I did quite a bit of research. I actually bought a lot of books. I've read a lot of books. I made some phone calls to some people inside of our synod to kind of figure this all out. Um, and got lots of great advice, picked up lots of books. But one of the things I began to notice was that books had very different approaches, and it was like they all seemed to, fit into a certain class, a certain qualification, if you will. And this guy put kind of words to it and kind of classified it, and I actually was very appreciative of that. See the minutia; it's boring stuff, but like helping you read, look, categorize things, like, if you will. But
Right.
anyway, so the charismatics seem to see demons in everything, and Frank Peretti is a well-known author in this, and Frank Peretti is like, your mower doesn't start. Oh, that's the mower don't start demon.
Oh yeah.
The oh, your computer's dead. Oh, you got a computer demon. He's after your computer, and it's like but that's just it. Like, everything's demons, everything. Spiritual
Mm-hmm.
warfare is just like constant. um the more dare I say neutral version of that, in between those two, so to speak, is kind of where we tend to sit, which is to say we don't like deny demons existence. They're real, they're out there. Generally speaking, we believe they do more in terms of pushing than they do possession. Possession can happen, but it's kind of wild the way that works too. Um, but it's more just the pushing, kind of like what the ancients felt, just pushing you in a certain direction, one way or the other.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
not in everything. We have a sinful world. We have sin in ourselves. If you screw up, sometimes it's just you screwing up, and a demon's got nothing to do with it. Um, that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. I don't know. It is interesting, and I don't know. I guess that's not something typically we talk about a whole lot, like just in
No.
normal Sunday church. But
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I don't think there's a necessarily a demon stopping the mower from starting, that sort of thing. But
What?
yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like in the last few years, I do feel more and more like there's people who are really letting demons get to them, you know. And I know we've talked it over and over about social media and stuff, but I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's some people I know that I'm like, they are so angry about stuff
Yeah.
that that they're just reading online or that they're seeing in the news or whatever, and they're
Yeah.
just like they're foaming at the mouth to this degree that I'm like, man, I think a demon has got them just hook, line, and sinker because they are just so enraged,
Yeah.
and they're willing to like burn down every relationship they have, even though they know people they've known their whole life or family members they've known their whole life, and they're so angry that they're willing to just cut off all those relationships because there's like a disagreement on something in politics or
It's
something.
true. It's true. And to be honest, like, it's possible. Like, I guess, that's just
Yeah.
it is possible. Now, on the other hand, there's also a lot of psychology that can go into that as well. Uh,
Yeah.
and honestly, so like this is where my understanding of certain amount of modern science within the realm of psychology is actually pretty fascinating and comes into play. Like, I know I've talked about CBT before, but cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of the new kid on the block. It's been
Yeah.
around for a while, but just comparatively, it's still a new kid on the block.
Right.
but basically the idea of that you make certain pathways in your brain, and the more you use certain ones, the more the more easily it comes about. So if you have somebody who gets angry and who is consistently angry, they will find it easier to be angry.
That's true. Yeah.
And then if you're in an echo chamber that is always making you angry, you will find yourself eventually foaming at the mouth and being just incredibly angry
Mhm.
all the time. But that being
Yeah.
said, again, kind of going back to the ancients and the way they viewed it, like, yeah, like demon can push you in that direction,
Yeah.
just kind of shove you, gentle nod, you know?
Yeah. I think there's something there with that cuz yeah, you definitely like I like when you said echo chamber because it's very true. It's like you have to be able to pull yourself. I'm someone who I love listening to depressing music. I
Mhm.
love it.
Yeah,
But I do have to at some point remember like, oh man, I'm like starting to get depressed. Like I'm starting to really feel it
yeah,
because it brings up memories or things in the past or things that just make me kind of sit and think about it. And sometimes it's kind of nice to think about it, but then there's at some point where I don't know, I get a couple weeks into it and it's like, oh man, I need to pull myself out of this, because it's like starting to get too much.
yeah. And they've
Um,
they've done studies on music as well, by the way. Music is,
yeah,
if you talk to a random person on the street, they'll probably tell you, like, if I get angry, I'll listen to some angry music, kind of get the frustration out, get the anger out. And the reality is that, like, that's not the way that works. Like,
yeah,
if
it's
you
not.
listen to angry music, you are not getting the anger out. You are ramping up your anger.
Yes.
When they've done studies on this, they'll ask a person like how angry they are or how upset they are, and then they'll listen to those types of music, and then they'll do the survey again, and they'll find that the people are always consistently, self-diagnose themselves worse.
Yeah.
They dig themselves deeper into the hole, so to speak.
Yes, of course.
So
Yeah, it's very true. I can I can tell. I mean, I definitely have that. I mean, I think I've talked about that before. That's like I definitely have a chemical imbalance that can take over. And
yeah,
I was talking to this actually with one of my band members the other day because there was kind of like some comments at a rehearsal that were a little hard for me to take,
yeah,
but it was like it wasn't some of the things were constructive criticism, and it's hard sometimes to hear
yeah,
that. And we got talking, and I kind of said, yeah, I just have to kind of keep myself going because I admitted to him like I'm gonna like not be able to sleep all week about this. And he was like, really? And I'm like, oh yeah.
Hardy's Prime Rib Experience with a
Whoa.
100% American Angus burger.
What was what was that? You still there?
I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna have to cut that piece out.
I mean, I think you just leave it in, because there's a good example of hey, look how quickly that pulled us out of it. You start talking about an Angus beef burger, you're not depressed much longer. I'll tell you that much.
So my little soundboard thing
Yeah.
and it's a freebie. You know how these are. It's a
Yeah.
freebie, and I added a new soundbite tonight, not about Angus burgers. But anyway, I'm listening to you. I'm completely into what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, that thing hasn't been tagged. Let me do that real quick, and I click on it, and it makes me watch an ad.
Oh man.
So an ad for what was that, Hardee's or whatever it was.
Yeah, oh Hardy's, yeah.
But yeah, I
No,
was I was actually listening to your story, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna click this real quick.
no, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry. I think you should just leave it in personally, but
Fine. You know what? I will. It's done.
good,
We're,
yeah.
we're leaving it
Yeah.
in. We're
No,
leaving the we're leaving the Hardee's ad in.
because
I
I was almost done anyway.
if
But
anybody if well, oh man. But yeah, no, but I do, but kind of to come back to the point though, I do understand what you mean, because like I internalize sometimes that stuff, and I do. It takes me forever to kind of get over it,
yeah.
and realize like, no, it was actually meant for my betterment. Uh,
Yeah, and I do like I know that everything's okay, but my brain and like my body tell me that like everything's ending. Like the
Yeah.
world's ending, your band hates you, all this stuff. And I know that's not the truth, but it's just like, and I told my band, the guy I was talking to, and I think it surprised him because I don't think he realized that things like affect me like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it definitely does. Like I feel it, and but I know that it's not real, but I do feel it. So if I go listen to a bunch of depressing music all week, it's just going to make it worse, So I
Yeah.
try to,
Yeah.
when I know that that's happening, I try to listen to something happy. I try to stay positive, like do
Yeah.
positive things. That usually helps a lot. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we move on, though, I did want to bring up this, and this is one of those times where it's like you have. So one of the things that he brought up in his conversation, and I love the classification, by the way, because I've kind of known it, but I didn't understand exactly how to classify it, and I really liked the fact that he classified it the way he did.
hmm
Um, there's two well-known um, exorcists that are kind of popular right now,
oh,
and they kind of would fit, some of their stories, and I've read some of their stories in their books, and it's the Warrens, and if you don't know who the Warrens are, like The Conjuring,
okay, yeah.
and that's the way their books read. They're like made for TV, made for movie.
hmm
And I've never, having read accounts of like real exorcisms from, tried and true trusted exorcists, like even Catholic exorcists and exorcists in other countries, like I can tell you, like what the Warrens write is, I don't want to say is garbage, but at the very least, it's exaggerated,
Yeah.
to maybe even to the extreme. It makes for a great movie. Doesn't necessarily make for a great anything else. Um, Now, the other side of that, though, there's also a really well-known, very famous case of exorcism that takes place that I'm, that I've known about for a while, and I've even read about it in the past, but I didn't know some of the other backstory. And during his presentation, he actually gave some of that backstory, and I was really fascinated by it.
Hmm.
So the particular case has to do with a young boy in St. Louis. Now, what makes this case so significant is it took place in 1949, and what makes it so significant is that it impacted whenever it came out in the newspapers, because it came out in the newspapers. Washington Post did an article on it. It impacted one William Peter Blatty. Now, if you don't know that name, that's okay. Most people wouldn't, but William Peter Blatty is the person who wrote the book The Exorcist,
Hmm.
that was later turned into a movie. And this is the particular exorcism case that he was fascinated about, that
Oh,
kind of
okay.
caught his attention, that, caused him, 20 years later to write the book.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so it's it's kind of a really fascinating case. Now what I usually tell people whenever I ask about it, because the Missouri Synod is actually involved in this, is what I usually tell people is the gal brought the child, the young man, and brought him to the seminary, but the seminary wasn't able to, perform the exorcism. And then eventually he was in a hospital, and the Catholic Jesuits eventually actually got it done, but they did it partially by baptizing the child. Now,
Okay, yeah.
that's what I've normally told people. And then I was kind of corrected by this
Oh,
guy. And here's the thing, though. Like, I even have in my library, I have a book that actually contains the original um, nurse journal. It has a journal of one of the nurses as she was tending to the boy while he was in the hospital.
oh, okay.
And so I have that, and I remember reading through that. But again, even that, like, will just tell you kind of what happened when he was in the hospital. It won't tell you what happened beforehand. It doesn't give you his backstory.
Hmm.
So here's the backstory, and I found this very fascinating, and it kind of corrected me in a lot of ways, and it actually makes me feel better because, quite frankly, I was like, "You mean the Lutherans didn't think about baptism, really?" Like, so terrible. But anyway, um, the backstory is that this boy had a really strong relationship with one of his aunts, and one of his aunts used to play with a Ouija board with him, like as a game. You remember, like even back in the day, it was released like it was a board game.
Oh, right.
It wasn't like, again, that's kind of like originally it was like a tool used like by witches and mediums and the like, trying to speak to the other side, but he had it more like a board game.
Mm-hmm.
And so him and his aunt would play on the Ouija board. And then his aunt passed away. And he was distraught. I mean, just distraught. And so he tried to use the Ouija board to connect to his aunt, to talk to her.
Yeah.
And that was when stuff kind of went downhill. And like, it's like to the point where like when he would go to sleep at night, sometimes like his bed would shake and stuff would move around and stuff. It was kind of weird like that. Eventually the mom moved to St. Louis. She did approach the Lutherans, the LCMS Lutherans, at the seminary to help her. They successfully exorcised the boy on several occasions. But what would happen is they would perform the exorcism, and then he would be released back to, his mom and everything, and they'd go home, and the boy would then continue to try to reconnect with his aunt.
Yeah.
And thus kind of inviting it back in, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a biblical text in Matthew that talks about a house swept clean, that talks about like when you cast a demon out, it floats around in the desolate places, finding nowhere to go. It decides to go back to where it came from, to the original person, and it finds the house swept clean. And so it invites 7 more. And that's kind of what happened. Like he was exorcised, and then he would go back to the Ouija board, and he would it'd kind of come back almost stronger.
Yeah.
Eventually the mother, she just couldn't do anything with it. And so the Jesuits came along. I guess somehow she had a connection with the Jesuits as well. And the Jesuits basically took over, and what they did is they put him in a hospital, in his own floor almost, in the hospital. And they had him there for 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
Doing the rite of exorcism almost every day.
Oh wow.
Sometimes multiple times a day. And so and ultimately, like it was after that he was finally cleared, and basically they found out what was going on. And they kind of got rid of the Ouija board. Good thing.
Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, so yeah, it's like, so obviously a messed up story, but at the same time, it's like, all this time I've been telling people like, oh yeah, Lutherans didn't think about baptism. Like, again, because I had read some stuff and that was kind of what it said. And so I was like, okay, as like, it didn't make any sense to me, but it was like, well, I mean, hey, mistakes happen. And, maybe they just, talking to the mom, maybe the mom told him, no, he was been baptized. But no, that wasn't the story at all. The story was that, like, he just kept going back to it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so anyway, interesting stuff, interesting story, interesting topic. Great pastors conference. It really was. It's a good time. And I'm going to read a PhD dissertation now. So
awesome. That sounds fun.
All right. Doesn't it? It does. It sounds so exciting.
I think that sounds great for you. I don't think I could make it through it. I'm sure it's interesting though. I'm sure it is.
Yeah. I'm sure it is. Oh man. I don't know. We still have a little bit of time. Did you have any questions for me?
As far as no stupid questions?
Yes. No such thing as a stupid question.
Casey. Yeah, I do have one.
Okay.
That I've been thinking of lately, because I kind of think of staying as this is like balance in our life. A lot of people like to quote the fact Jesus talked to the tax collectors and the prostitutes and all these people. But how are we as Christians to go about talking with people, who maybe don't agree with us morally, or they don't have the same values as us? And and I'm not saying we shouldn't talk to them, but is there a breaking point of too much for people? Is there,
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
there like any sort of, I don't know if you've ever really, I don't know if there's any sort of, I don't know, conversation about that amongst like seminary people about like
Well, I don't know if
how,
it's necessarily seminary people, but I think it is a good conversation to have. Because this strikes at the heart of like evangelism, right? Being able
Mhm.
to venture out and talk to people. And I mean, and again, we've actually talked about that part of it before in the past, right? Like when you go out to the world to actually tell people about Jesus, you have to also realize that like your starting point is they don't believe in Jesus, which
yeah.
means you can't expect them to have the same morals as you.
Mhm.
And you can't expect them to be in the same place that you are. And a lot of times that's exactly what we do. We venture out and we talk to somebody and we're like, can you believe that they don't think that homosexuality is a sin? I'm like, yeah, I get that. I get where, I
Yeah.
know I do expect them to not believe that homosexuality is a sin.
Mhm.
Now, I believe it is a sin, but I can't expect them to believe that it's not a sin. That's part of our conversation that we're going to have.
Yeah.
Now I will say this, though, we do have to add a little bit of context to this because, that quote, Jesus talks to tax collectors and prostitutes and all that, and it's like it always gets thrown out. But
Yes.
what's unsaid is the fact that, like, if in the ancient world, specifically in the ancient Jewish world, like if you committed some form of atrocity, you were very limited in what you could do.
Mm.
Very limited. The society just kind of like spurned you. Um, and so like for instance, let's say for instance you had done something as a priest or a Pharisee or even as somebody who is in the ranks of those men and you
Yes.
were defrocked. That is to say you were basically kicked out of that. Like you couldn't do anything. You weren't even good enough to be a shepherd anymore.
Right.
The best you could do is kind of become an in-between person for like Rome, in which
Mhm.
case tax collector's it.
Ah, okay.
And so like, and so for instance, and I'll bring up that example. I was very specific in that example for a good reason. There is some anecdotal evidence that Matthew very well may have been a defrocked like priest of some kind.
Yeah.
Some of his word choices, he quotes the Old Testament very extensively. He talks about the quotes of Jesus that quote the Old Testament very extensively, and his style of writing is definitely been influenced heavily by Hebraic and Aramaic writing.
Mm.
And so all of that kind of points to the idea that maybe Matthew was at some point a priest and got defrocked. And
Oh.
again, if you were a defrocked priest, the best you could do was a tax collector.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, again, so that's and then prostitutes kind of fall in the same boat, right? Like if you're a woman and you do something immoral and you're like you don't have a husband per se, like again, if you have a child out of wedlock and you don't get killed,
Mhm.
like stoned to death, so to speak, well, good luck. The community doesn't want to take care of you anymore. Like, look at this
Right.
heinous thing that you did. And so, like, it's very and the irony is, of course, is that like, you know, they're prostitutes now, but who exactly are they selling themselves to? You know,
Yeah.
all these high moral men, you know,
Yeah. No.
right?
Yeah, that's so a lot of like back then, I mean, and probably I mean still probably some of this today, but it's like they were in those positions because of their past, like because of specific. It wasn't like, oh, this person just decided they wanted to be a prostitute. Typically,
Yeah. And
it was more like a
there's
social. They were cut off from other
yes.
opportunities. Okay,
Now, are there exceptions to that rule? Of course there are. There's always exceptions to every rule. Like some people
right.
just wanted to be tax collectors because they were kind of jerks and they wanted to get a bunch of money and it was a quick, easy way to do that. You know,
Yeah.
some women chose to do the prostitution thing, but by and large, from the things that I've read, it was not necessarily a desirable job or position. It was something that you were lowered to based on probably some atrocious sin or crime.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these people are, as sinners, right? Their career choice is sinful, and they're
Right.
stuck there. They don't really have a way out, and they're just kind of stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way they're viewing the world. And so Jesus is talking to them. And so these are the people that are broken. Like these people are just broken.
Yeah.
They're not in a good place. Their life has not gone the way they thought it should or way it planned, and so on and so forth. Um, and so yeah, like so that's one thing that we need to kind of get out there. But at the same time, like that's not a cop out from your question, because Jesus also goes into, Gentile areas, to people that
Mm-hmm.
definitely do not think like him and definitely do not think like a Jewish person. And they're definitely not trying to be quote unquote righteous. You know, um, Caesarea Philippi is a cesspool,
Yeah.
of false gods and all kinds of false things. So yeah, no, it's just an atrocious place. Like that is the kind of place that wants nothing to do with, Jesus, so to speak. And so Jesus still
Mm-hmm.
goes there, and he still talks to people. He still has that dialogue with them, that communication with them. From my own standpoint, and I would say, just as a kind of maybe a point of reference or a point of advice, I would say basically, like, if you are somehow, I guess, maybe either being swayed, turned, or otherwise, feel very, very uncomfortable with the conversation, you need to take a step back and at least evaluate why you're feeling uncomfortable. If you're just feeling uncomfortable because they're saying uncomfortable things that you disagree with, well, maybe kind of do some reality check and kind of, have that open dialogue and that conversation. But,
Mm-hmm.
if on the other hand, you are feeling uncomfortable, um, I guess for other reasons, or other reasons that you perceive as maybe dangerous, or what have you, yeah, then maybe take a little bit of a step back. But honestly, like, we're called to tell people about Jesus, and sometimes that means being put in harm's way.
Yeah.
Again, we live in a world where everybody says safety first, and that's actually kind of a problem. Like, uh, God isn't safe, Jesus isn't safe, and telling people about Jesus isn't always safe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll also say this though, like, because we can go to the other side of that argument and talk about other things. So it's almost like giving to the poor.
Yeah.
How much do we give to the poor? Do we give to the poor so much that we are poor? And, what about the fact that we have to take care of our family? Does giving to the poor so much to the point where we're no longer taking care of our family and our own family goes hungry and hurts, is that necessarily a good thing? And the answer is no. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, we have to take care of the people that God has entrusted to us.
Yeah.
And so therefore, like, we can't just say, well, we got to give to the poor until we're poor. Now, some people have chosen that path, and they've also chosen it, by the way, to not have a family and to live in a state of poverty. I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You definitely don't have to, but you definitely, I don't think there's anything like, I mean, again, this is where you get into things like, monastics, right? Like, some people are the poverty monastics, and, they've chosen a life of poverty, for the sake of others, but they're also not, they're also working, towards something. They're trying to help. Now, in a lot of these cases, their vows are faulty, and that's the one thing Luther called out with the monastics, is it wasn't so much that they were living a celibate lifestyle and all that. It was the fact that they were making vows without realizing what they were doing. And on top of that, they were making vows a lot of times thinking that they were somehow, through their vows, earning their way into heaven.
Oh.
And that's just not accurate. And
Mm-hmm.
when you correct that, then all of a sudden, like, the monastics don't want to be monastics anymore. What?
Yeah. That's true.
But there are, I mean,
It's
again, like even Paul says, like, talks about this, like there are some people that are, live a celibate life, and they can even live a poverty life to give to others, and that's perfectly fine. And we should
Mhm.
all give. Don't get me wrong. We should all give and give towards others, but we just can't do it at the neglect of who God has entrusted to us.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point because I think that's another thing for me is like trying to find the right balance with, you know, some of those things and but then being a leader in certain situations, having a family, there's certain times where there's parts of me that feel like I don't I feel like maybe I need to have a little more distance, in certain ways. I know I'm being probably a little too cryptic, but um,
Well, but let
you
me
know,
let me put it to you this way. Like there's a difference between, like, if you're, happen to have a run in at a gas station or something with somebody and have a conversation versus inviting them into your home.
yeah,
you know because again, you also, I mean, again, this is where you look at it like, okay, yes, God has given you the ability to tell other people about Jesus. That's a good thing. He's given you, dare I say, the stomach to kind of handle those conversations, even the tough ones. Great. But he's also entrusted to you a family, and in that family there's kids, and you
yeah,
have to watch the example that the people that you're around give to your kids.
yeah,
um, and you also have to realize, like, some of those people might just downright be unsafe, right?
yeah,
Remember that, you're walking into a world that has no morals.
hmm,
I sometimes talk to people, from the logic standpoint, this can get really scary really quick. Like, if I say, boy, my neighbor really upset me, and okay, fine. And then I go, well, why shouldn't I murder my neighbor? You know,
yeah,
your answer at first is, well, murder's wrong. And I'll be like, okay, well, who says murder's wrong? Like,
right,
well, and remember, you can't say God, because if you say God, like, the game's off, right? You live in a
hmm,
world that doesn't believe in God, and they'll say, well, society has deemed it as wrong. Like, okay, but society is a grouping of people. What if I disagree on the singular point? Can I disagree? Well, yeah, you can disagree on a single point. Oh, okay, so then why is it wrong for me to go murder my neighbor?
yeah,
Um, and basically it'll all boil down to, in the end, if you talk to somebody who's truly immoral, who's truly given up on any form of higher power or God, the answer will ultimately become, because I don't want to go to jail. See, it's all about me. I don't want
right,
myself to come to harm. I don't want to accidentally get hurt, die, be put into a wheelchair, or end up going to prison. Like, those
yeah,
are all unpleasant. I don't like that unpleasantness, therefore I won't do this.
yes,
But
yeah,
but if I thought for some reason I can get away with it, well, now what?
maybe that, yeah,
I mean, but see, that's the problem that we run into. And so, like, you got to realize, like, if you talk to somebody who really has, like, there is no God to them, and you really converse, like, you realize, like, they're on a slippery slope to a whole world of things that are really awful.
hmm,
Um, Now, again, do they need to hear about Jesus? Absolutely, they do. It'll change their life. Um, in so many different ways, and they definitely need to hear about Jesus, and they definitely need somebody to bring Jesus to that person.
yeah,
But you also have to remember that you have a family, and again, if you just start hanging out, like, let's say you just say, well, I'm just going to invite this person over all the time, and again, it's fine to invite them over, and maybe even have a conversation with your kid and be like, look, we're also going to tell this person about Jesus, but they have a different life than us, and
hmm,
yada yada yada. It's good, and and that could be a great example for them. But if you are inviting this person over, like, let's say, all the time, like, now the person's kind of setting an example for your kids.
that's what I'm worried about. I think the most is just how it affects some of the people because this particular situation it affects a group of people
Yeah,
and that's what's hard for me is I want to show love towards this person and I've even like I've talked to somebody about this situation a little bit since in private a little more specific and I think they were a little taken back by like well that seems really like wrong of you to not want to allow this person in this but they're only viewing it from like the one that's like a individual standpoint
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
like, you shouldn't judge somebody. And I'm like, well, it's not that I'm trying to judge them, or I don't want to, I think they seem like a nice person, as far as like they can have a nice conversation, but it's more the fact that they would be around a lot of other people
Mhm.
who would be some younger people who I think would be influenced.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, I don't know if I can do that,
Yeah. And
so
and
that's
again,
what.
that's gonna be something that you're gonna have to wrestle with a little bit to kind of figure out exactly which way you should go.
Yeah.
Because again, you got two sides, right? Like on the one hand, you want to show grace and you want to show mercy, and you also want to show the love of Christ to a person who will need it. On the other
Mhm.
hand, if there's other people that are in essence under you, so to speak, that might be influenced by this in a bad way and in a bad direction, like that is something to be thought of. Like you got to take that leadership role seriously.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, I think there's just some of those situations that it is hard, because we want to be spreading the word of God, and we want to show people, but then there's sometimes there's a little bit harder conversations to have when it starts involving other people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also people who maybe they don't have a moral ground that they stand on. So introducing them to someone who doesn't have any morals, or they have a viewpoint of life that's very conflicting with my own,
Yeah.
it starts that's where it starts feeling pretty dicey. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't know, so yeah. But anyway,
All
yeah,
right.
thanks.
Yeah. See, we need intro music for that.
I know we do.
We really do. We really do. We don't, but we have intro music for the other part though.
Like a ruler slapping a desk.
Welcome now
Something.
to Saints in the Shadows. Hear the stories of the saints, learn about things you never knew. See if you can figure out who the saint is before the end.
Oh man. That's right. Like a ruler slapped against a desk. That's what we do.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let me tell you about a man who stood so firmly for the truth that history eventually had to invent a phrase just to describe him. Because when no one else would stand, when emperors leaned, when bishops wavered, when crowds decided compromise sounded kinder than conviction, they didn't call him a hero while he lived, because there was one man who simply didn't move. They called him difficult. They called him a troublemaker. They called him dangerous. But for tonight, we'll call him the man against the world. But that part comes later. He was born in Alexandria. Now, if you've ever wanted a quiet life, Alexandria was not the place to look. This was a city that argued theology in the streets and rioted over ideas. A city that produced saints and heretics, sometimes in the very same family. And from that city came a boy, bright, watchful, serious, who learned early that words matter. Because if you get the words wrong, you get God wrong. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was not a small problem in the 4th century. The question sounded innocent enough. Was Jesus truly God, or merely close? Was he eternal, or created? Most people thought the argument was unnecessary. Why split hairs, they said. Why not just agree to disagree? But this young man understood something about something others did not. If Christ is created, then salvation is borrowed, and borrowed salvation can be taken away. He watched as bishops gathered, councils were called, creeds were written, and for a moment, just a moment, it seemed like the truth had prevailed. The heresy was condemned, the arguments ended, or so they thought. Soon the teachers returned. The emperors wanted peace. Bishops wanted compromise. Just soften the language. Just change one little phrase. Unity matters more than precision. That's when the trouble began. Because the young man, now a bishop, said no. Not loudly, not angrily, just no. What followed was a lesson history loves to forget. Truth does not always win immediately. Sometimes it just survives. He was exiled, then brought back, then exiled again. He was driven out of his diocese 5 times. 5! He hid among monks in the desert. He slept in tombs. He was smuggled from house to house while lesser men took his office and called it peace. And still, he wrote. Someone once warned him, "The whole world is against you." He answered calmly, "Then I am against the world." But he wasn't stubborn. He was clear. Clear that God cannot be negotiated. Clear that truth does not depend on a vote. Clear that the faith handed down does not change because emperors do. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tide turned. The emperors passed on. The compromises fell apart. The creed endured. The man who had been too difficult was suddenly called faithful. He died quietly at home at last. No exile, no soldiers, just peace. But history wasn't done with him, because the church realized something extraordinary, that without this one man who lost friends, exile after exile, who chose truth over acceptance, Christianity itself might have lost its center. That man had a name whispered in exile, argued over in councils, honored by generations who never faced what he faced. His name was Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, defender of Christ's divinity. Saint in the shadow for today. Well, actually not today, for May 2nd. So I believe that is Saturday. And so, if you would like to celebrate Saint Athanasius, you certainly can. The dish that they had suggested was called, I'm gonna mess this up, Tamaya fava bean fritters.
Whoa.
So there's a mouthful. So it's basically fava bean fritters, which honestly, fava beans need a little help. I actually like fava beans, but you definitely, in a fritter might be a good way to do them.
Like a corn fritter, but with fava beans?
Apparently with Tamaya. So
you know what? I could do that.
Yeah. I'm trying to get back to that page here. So I can read a little bit more about it, because I opened up a different book. Yeah, lots of spices in this. Lots of spices.
With fava beans, you got to cover them up.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of spices. What does it say about this? They're similar to falafel, an old Egyptian favorite. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And the drink of the day is called a contramundum. And
wow.
And that's very fitting, because contramundum is Latin for against the world. It's kind of you can look it up. You can do like a Google search and find a recipe for it, and it's got some bitters in it and stuff. So it's got a little bit of bitter in there. So here's the thing. Like I was doing this, getting ready for tonight, and I was like, have we done Saint Athanasius? And I couldn't remember. And then I went back to my sheets, but my sheet. So the thing is when we started this, and it wasn't called Saints and Shed, it's called Lives of the Saints. And I was writing these. I was writing these, and I didn't save them. I just didn't. I guess I didn't think it would take off. I don't know. I guess I thought I would quit after a while. So anyway, so I didn't save them. So I have no idea what my first ones were. I'd have to go back and re-listen. to the lives of the saints.
The name sounds familiar to me, which I don't know a lot of saints. So I feel like maybe we did, or maybe you did, but I mean, I'm not complaining because I obviously don't remember well enough to remember.
So
all the
Saint
details.
Athanasius is a big one because we do the Athanasian Creed.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so, so he's a big name. And by the way, Athanasius did not write the Athanasian Creed, but it was written in a style that is very similar to his. And so it's a lot of times it's equated with him.
Right.
And even my little thing here, it kind of talked about his precision of language. I had a little bit of fun with the whole exile and stuff. He was crazy. He was he jumped out of a window and escaped.
Oh, wow.
And he escaped to the desert. Now, what's really interesting about that is I know we've done St. Anthony, and St. Anthony was one of the first quote unquote monks, so to speak. There were lots of people that would go out into the desert. There's a few Bible verses that talk about, and kind of this actually equates to our first topic whenever we was talking about demonology, but there's a few Bible verses that talk about, demons going across desolate places. And so the way the ancients viewed that is that demons are in the desert. And by the way, there's nothing, I guess I don't have any verses or anything to say that that's not true, I guess is the best way to say that. But it is kind of interesting. But yeah, so a lot of people would go out and live in exile in essence, or live alone in the desert. But a lot of them would just go out there for a while and then they'd come back. And then a lot of them were driven crazy or mad from the solitude. And so very few people made it, and very few people made it so successfully that they became known for it. And St. Anthony was one of those. He was the first one that made it, and was very successful and not crazy. And, but part of the reason for that is stuff like this, St. Athanasius went and lived with him for a while. The reason we know about St. Anthony is because of St. Athanasius.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he's the one who wrote everything down about Anthony. So
interesting.
So yeah, no, it's really, really fascinating. And again, the history that I wrote in there is actually pretty decent too, because, because again, so obviously we're talking about the Arian controversy, right? There's a time, Jesus was created kind of thing. That's what Arius believed. And we've talked about that in a few of the other past episodes. And basically the Council of Nicaea kind of defeated it. It went down. It was nothing. And then all of a sudden, the Arians kind of did these political maneuvers, and they kind of convinced the emperor, and the emperor kind of backtracked a little bit. And especially towards the end of his life, he did. And so the Arian controversy actually reared its ugly head again. And during one of those escapades, they were going after Athanasius, and that's when he was exiled. Well, one of the times he was exiled anyway. And so, again, Athanasius lived a crazy life. He was also very, very short, and realized that Alexandria is in the northern part of Africa. So he was an African. He had incredibly dark complexion and was actually known for his dark complexion. And he was also incredibly short. So it's one of those things, if you think this is one of those interesting things. If you think Christianity is filled with a bunch of just Caucasian people, you're actually incredibly wrong. Most of our good founding fathers had very dark complexions.
Oh yeah. Well, and the first Bible was Ethiopian, right? Is that correct?
The first Bible,
or the first official Bible, wasn't it? Or am I off about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, that was a little bit harder to track.
Oh, okay.
So
I just know that there's a lot of times people claim that basically Christianity was forced upon the world by Caucasian, Europeans or something. And that's not true. There's a lot of countries that developed it long before any British colonies came around or anything like that.
Oh yeah. No. It started very much in the northern African areas, Egypt and the Middle East, of course. So, yeah. So, all right. Well, is there any other things to talk about there? Otherwise, I'll close that segment out.
I think we're good.
All right.
And so it ends. The light shines in the shadow. And now you know more about the story of one of the saints of history.
All right, closing that segment out, and of course, I hate like the speed by which I switch segments, and maybe that's something I need to figure out. But anyway, on to our next section.
And it's time for Lectionary Loop and our look at the upcoming lectionary texts.
All right, we have a good set of texts. We're in Easter 5. So that's kind of where we're at. Fifth Sunday after Easter, we're before the Ascension. So, just as a reminder, the Ascension Day marks the 40 days after the resurrection of Christ. So this is all the time that Jesus spent walking and talking and teaching his disciples. So again, Jesus didn't like appear to everybody and then say, okay, I'm leaving, going to my Father, and like out, no, he walked and talked and taught. So for 40 days. And so we're in the midst of that 40-day period. But the texts for today are coming up. Of course, we have Acts. We have some of the speech of Stephen. And then we also have, again, we've been following First Peter for a while. We got more of that. And then we got John 14, which is a great passage. This is the in my Father's house are many rooms and so on and so forth. So we got a lot of text. Now, I will say this, though. I'm, from a lectionary standpoint, all the texts kind of have a very good focus of follow Christ. He has the strong, good, solid teaching. You see it in Stephen. Peter calls for it. Jesus kind of, I am the way, the truth, and the life, kind of becomes that pinnacle verse. For me, because it's Confirmation Sunday, I am going to focus also on the fact that we have so much learning to do. A large part of this is the idea that, like, hey, none of these guys are done yet. Like Stephen's being murdered, but Saul's right there, and he's learning, and he's going to spend the rest of his life learning. And Peter is calling on those early Christians to make sure that they don't give up, the faith, because there's so much depth there. There's so much more there. And then, of course, Jesus teaching his disciples, and a lot of it they're not going to understand until after the resurrection. So lots of times where we can say, well, look, there's obviously there's just more to learn. There's just more to go. And Confirmation, is a great starting point, but it's not the end. It's just the beginning. So that's kind of where I'm heading in that department.
Yeah. Very nice.
All right. Well, I noticed, I just looked at the time. That's why I'm starting to rush a little bit, because I'm like, oh, yeah, we got to do stuff. Okay.
I know. We're pretty. Yeah.
All right. So are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Here we go.
To our last segment, probably.
All right. Are we ready for church chatter? Oh, we got it.
I'm going to have to see. Here's the thing. I have that one recording and it has all that extra stuff. And then I went ahead and I thought I fixed it, and I did, but like, I feel like that one with all the extra stuff where, like, should we do our last segment? But the button doesn't quite do it justice.
Church
chatter. Yeah. See, it just,
church chatter.
See, we just got church chatter. The extra stuff kind of gives it some life. I might have to re-record that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so just looking at things, obviously we have Confirmation coming up this Sunday. Big day, special day, awesome day. Can't wait. Super excited. We also have our joint service for Good Shepherd coming up on May 17th. That's a 10 a.m. service. All three of the churches are coming together for one big service. It's going to be fantastic. And we also have the installation of Miss Hicks as the principal. So we have a lot of great things that are going on in terms of that. And of course, also, we got to highlight, we got VBS coming up June 7th through the 11th. So mark your calendars now. Starts Sunday evening. It'll be great. So, all right.
Very nice.
All right. What's going on in your neck of the woods? What's happening in your territory?
Well, I can pretty much say ditto. We got confirmation coming up, so that's exciting. You know, we have a preschool program here that we're advertising, getting people signed up for next school year, all that
sure,
stuff. So that's exciting. We're getting ready for VBS as well, and everything. I'm getting the VBS band information out to schools and stuff in the area.
Yeah.
So
When do you guys start choosing names? Because I remember that was a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. I try to let them have a rehearsal or two before they choose a name to like kind of let it settle in.
Sure, absolutely.
So we'll see. I mean, maybe we'll do that like the second rehearsal or third rehearsal.
Yeah.
They're usually itching to get a name though. So
yeah, fair enough.
We'll see how it goes this year, because the second year they were very they wanted to do the name from the year before. And I was like, no, guys, it's a new name every year. Like because there's people who, there's new people in the group. It's not all the same people anymore. You know, we're trying to like each year can be unique and fun. And so they really struggled with that. The older kids did. So I'm wondering if this year, now that they've had a year, 2 years and had two different names, if they'll be like, okay, we can do a new name, you know?
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, so we're getting that going again. Our pastors coming in June, so we're excited for that.
That's exciting.
And yes, and so that's just what we're gearing up towards. We have Pastor Miller does. He's been helping out our Savior for a long time, doing like Sunday every month, but in not this weekend, but next weekend, I think is his last one, because our pastor will be here after that. So it's the sort of bittersweet, because as everybody at St. John's does too, it's like we all love Pastor Miller. So it's like, oh man, so it's his last one. So that'll be, big Sunday for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, he comes and helps us too. So he's awesome.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I realized like I had that whole snafu where we played the commercial with the Angus beef.
Yes.
And I told you I like added a new soundbite, but I never played the soundbite.
Oh yeah,
are
it.
You ready for this?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
That's a good one.
I added that tonight. I never had a chance to use it, but oh man, I cracked myself up. That's the worst part. I cracked myself up.
Well, you're having fun.
Nobody else finds it funny, but I do.
Hey, you're having a good time. That's what's important. You got to have a good time.
That's right. All right. Well, I think that's all I have.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, I tell you what, everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in, so to speak. However you get it, via the app or one of the music sources. But God's blessings to all of you. Bye.
Bye. Oh, yeah.